Welcome in. The lamp is lit, the door is closed, and the night is finally yours. Tonight, you step into one of the oldest stories human hands ever wrote down, the story of Osiris, the gentle king who was murdered by his own brother and made whole again by the wife who refused to stop searching for him, and you will follow it from the first betrayal all the way to the first sunrise on the far side of death. If nights like this one help you loosen your grip on the day, a like or a subscribe is a kind way to say so, and it helps these stories find the people who need them. And if you would like to leave a comment before you drift, tell me who first told you stories in the dark when you were small, and whether you can still hear their voice. So find the most comfortable shape you can, and let your shoulders come down from wherever the day left them. Lower the light if there is a light, close your eyes if they are not closed already, and let the story come to you the way the flood comes to the fields, slowly and without being asked. There is a sound the river makes when it has climbed up over the fields in the season of the flood, a wide, soft, moving sound with no edges to it, and tonight it is the last thing standing between you and sleep. You are lying on the flat roof of a small mud brick house in a river town, on a reed mat that still holds the warmth of the day, with the whole open sky above you and the drowned fields shining faintly all around. The heat is leaving the walls beneath you now, giving itself back to the dark a little at a time. Somewhere below, a last lamp is being carried from one room to another, and its glow moves across the underside of the palm leaves and then is gone. The air smells of wet earth and river silt, of oil and warm brick, and the green of things that grow fast in flood water. A dog settles into the dust of a lane. A door is drawn closed. The town is folding itself up for the night, one small sound at a time. And you lie there and let it. There is nothing left to do today. The work of the day is finished, or it is not, and either way it will keep until morning. Above you the first stars are out, faint and then less faint, and the river goes on with its wide, soft, moving sound, and into that sound, gently, an old story begins to come, the way an old story does when the night is quiet enough to hold it. Long ago, before the story you are lying in tonight, there was a king on the earth named Osiris, and he was not yet a god of the dead, but a living king in a living country beside the river. That is where the story starts, so let it start there, in the green and the quiet, with nothing yet gone wrong. The country he ruled was young. The people of it were young too, in the way that all people are young when the world is still teaching them how to live in it. Before Osiris came among them, they had not always known the kindest ways of doing things. They ate what they could find. They quarreled and settled the quarrels badly. They did not always know when to plant, or how to wait for the river, or what to do with the long gift of the flood when it came climbing up over the land the way it climbs up over the fields tonight. Osiris taught them. That is the first thing to remember about him, before anything else happens, that he was a king who taught rather than a king who took. He was the son of Geb, who was the earth itself, the low, brown, patient body of the land, and of Nut, who was the sky arched over everything, the great dark curve of her spangled with stars just like the sky above your roof. From the earth and the sky together came Osiris, and something of both was in him, the steadiness of the ground and the wideness of the heavens. He showed the people how to plant grain. He knelt in the black mud that the flood leaves behind when it draws back, that rich, dark soil that smells the way the air smells around you now, and he pressed the seed into it with his own hands so they would see how it was done. He taught them to read the river, to know its rising and its falling, to store what they gathered against the lean part of the year. He taught them which plants would feed them and which would heal them and which to leave alone. And more than any of this, he taught them how to be gentle with one another. When two people came before him with a quarrel between them, he did not raise a hand or a voice. He listened. He found the fair thing, the thing that let both of them keep their honor, and he spoke it plainly, and the quarrel went out of them like heat going out of a wall at night. Little by little, the people learned from him that words could settle what fists only made worse, and that a country held together by fairness was a country that could sleep at night without fear. Beside him in all of this was Isis, who was his wife and his sister both, for that is how it was among the first gods, and who was as wise as he was gentle. If Osiris taught the people how to live, Isis taught them the deeper crafts, the ones that live closer to the bone. She knew the names of things, and to know the true name of a thing is to have a kind of power over it. She knew the words that heal and the words that bind. She knew how to grind grain and how to spin flax and how to sit with a woman through a hard birth and bring the child safely into the light. The people loved Osiris for his fairness, and they loved Isis for her wisdom, and between the two of them the land grew quiet and green and glad. You can feel that peace lying here. It is worth staying in it a moment before the story moves, because the story will not stay in it long, and the peace is the thing worth remembering. Picture a country the way it must have looked in those first good years. The river runs full and slow down the middle of everything. On either side, the fields are dark and rich and heavy with grain. Cattle stand in the shallows in the cool of the morning. Smoke rises straight up from cooking fires because there is no wind to bend it. Children run along the tops of the dikes. Old people sit in doorways in the last of the sun. The whole world is in order, and the order feels as though it has always been there and always will be. And picture how a day ended in that rain, because the ending of the days is the part that matters most on a night like this one. When the sun went low and the heat began to lift off the fields, the people came in from the water and the grain with the mud drying on their feet, and they ate together in the last of the light. The bread was warm. The beer was thick and sweet. Someone told a story, or someone sang, and the small children fell asleep first, the way small children do, right there among the grown ones, and were carried in. The lamps were lit, and then, one by one, put out. And the whole country lay down under the same wide sky, unafraid, because the king was fair and the river was kind, and there was nothing in the dark that anyone needed to fear. That was the gift of Osiris, in the end. Not the grain and not the law, but the sleep of a people who trusted the world to still be there in the morning. But into that green and quiet country came a shadow, and the shadow had a name, and the name was Set. Set was the brother of Osiris, born of the same earth and the same sky, and there was in him from the very beginning something restless and hard. Where Osiris was the settled land, Set was the desert beyond it, the red country where nothing grows, the place of storms and heat, and the dry, killing wind. Some brothers are made of the same stuff and turn out gentle together. Set was not made of the same stuff, or if he was, it had cooled into something else, something with edges. He watched his brother. That is what jealousy is in the beginning, only a watching. He watched the people crowd close to Osiris to hear him speak. He watched them press seed into the black soil and lift their harvest and thank the king for teaching them how. He watched Isis walk beside her husband, wise and calm and loved. And with them, more quietly, walked Nephthys, sister to Isis and to Set both, gentle where Set was hard, standing a little apart, seeing more than she said. Set watched all of it, and something in him grew heavy, and he did not yet have a name for the heaviness, and that is often the most dangerous time, when a feeling has not yet been named, and so cannot yet be reasoned with. He did not act. Not yet. Jealousy is patient before it is anything else. He kept his face smooth and his voice even, and he stood among them at the feasts and the festivals, and no one who looked at him would have known what was gathering behind his eyes. But it was gathering. Under the green peace of that country, in the one heart that had turned away from gentleness, a plan was beginning to take shape, slow and cold and certain, the way frost takes shape on the desert stones in the last dark hour before the sun. For now, though, none of the others could see it. For now the land was still green, and the river still ran full, and Osiris was still a living king teaching a living people how to be kind. Let the chapter close there, on the world still whole, on the brother still watching and biding his time. There is no need to hurry toward what comes next. The night is long, and the story knows its own pace, and so, more and more, do you. The thing about a plan made in patience is that when it finally moves, it moves gently. It does not come with shouting. It comes with a smile and a warm room and a gift. Set had watched and waited a long while, and in that long while his jealousy had cooled and hardened into something with a shape and a purpose. He no longer only resented his brother. He had decided to be rid of him. But Set was not a fool, and he knew that Osiris was loved, and that a king who is loved cannot simply be struck down in the open without the whole country rising against the one who struck him. So Set did what patient cruelty always does. He made his ending look like a game. He had a chest made. You should picture it carefully, because it is the heart of this chapter and the hinge of the whole story. It was made of cedar, that fragrant wood that came from the far hills to the north, wood that most people in that river country would rarely have seen and never have owned. It was carved and painted and fitted with the greatest care, gleaming, beautiful, the kind of object that draws every eye in a room the moment it is carried in. And it was made to one secret measure. It was made to fit the body of Osiris exactly, his height and his breadth, and the length of his arms, though no one in the world knew that but Set, who had taken the measure quietly and told no one why. Then Set held a feast. It was a warm feast, a generous one, lamplit and easy, with food enough for everyone and no sign at all of what lay underneath it. Osiris came to it without a shadow of suspicion, because why would he suspect anything? This was his brother's table, and Osiris was a king who settled quarrels with words and could not easily imagine a heart that meant him harm. He ate and he laughed, and he sat among the others in the soft yellow light, and the evening went on the way good evenings go, unhurried and full. And at the height of it, when the room was warm and the wine had gone round and everyone was easy, Set had the chest carried in. There was the sound a crowd makes when something beautiful appears among them, a low murmur, an intake of breath. The cedar caught the lamplight and threw it back gold. The paint shone. The guests leaned in to look, and Sat, smiling, standing over it with his hand resting on the polished lid, made them an offer that sounded like nothing more than a bit of festival fun. "Whoever lies down inside this chest," he said, "and fits it exactly, may keep it. It is a gift. It belongs to the one whose body it was made for." You can imagine how a room takes to a game like that. It is a fine prize, the finest thing any of them has ever seen, and the price of trying for it is only to lie down for a moment in front of your friends. So they tried. One by one, the guests came forward and climbed in and lay down, laughing, and one by one the chest did not fit them. This one was too short, and there was a hand's width of empty cedar past the crown of his head. That one was too broad, and his shoulders would not settle down into it. Another was too tall, and could not straighten his legs. Each time the room laughed a little, warm and unworried, and the guest climbed out, and the next one climbed in, and the beautiful chest sat there in the lamplight, waiting for the body it had been built to hold. And all the while, Set stood beside it with his easy smile, and watched, and waited, because he knew the only body in the world that chest would fit, and he knew that sooner or later, the game would come around to that body. At last it came around to Osiris. Perhaps the others called for him to try. Perhaps he rose on his own, curious, still smiling from the last round of laughter. However it happened, the gentle king came forward to the beautiful chest that his brother had made, and he stepped in, and he lay down. And he fit. Of course he fit. He lay down into it, and it took him the way a shadow takes the thing that casts it, close on every side, exact, as though the wood had been grown around him. For one breath there was only the small satisfied sound of a game solved, the prize claimed. The beautiful thing found its owner at last. Osiris lay in the fragrant cedar and looked up at the lamplit faces, looking down at him, and there was nothing yet in his own face but ease. Then the lid came down. It came down fast, and it came down hard, and it was Set who brought it down, and in the same moment the men who were Set's own, the ones who had been waiting for this all evening among the easy guests, moved to the chest and held the lid fast. Osiris was inside. The gentle light was shut away from him, and where a breath before there had been a game and a gift, now there was a sealed box with a living king inside it, and his brother leaning his whole weight upon the lid. They sealed it. They poured molten lead into the seams, so that not a crack was left, not a thread of air, not a line of light. The beautiful chest that had drawn every eye became in a single turning the tightest and most terrible of coffins, and the man inside it was the kindest king the land had ever known, and the one who had done it was his own brother, smiling still, breathing hard now with the work of it. The feast was over. The warmth went out of the room the way warmth goes out of a wall when the sun is long down. What had been a bright lamplit hall full of laughter was now a place where a dreadful thing had been done quietly and quickly, and most of those who had laughed did not yet even understand what they had seen. Sat did not linger. A thing like this cannot be left where it was done. In the dark of that same night, the sealed chest was lifted and carried out of the hall, out of the house, out through the sleeping town toward the river, that same wide, slow river that runs below your roof tonight. The men who carried it went quietly. The country was asleep and did not know that its king was being carried through it in a box. They came to the water, and they gave the chest to the river. There was no more to it than that in the end. No storm, no crying out, only the dark water taking the weight of the cedar and turning it, easing it out from the bank, letting the current find it. The chest settled low and began to move. And the river, which does not know what it carries and does not judge and does not stop, took the sleeping king onto its wide back and carried him away into the night, north and north and north, toward the sea. Let the chapter close there, gently, the way the water closed over the wake of the chest. The worst thing has been done, and yet the night does not turn loud, because the story is not a story of loudness. It is a story of what comes after the worst thing, and of the one who will not stop looking. But that is not yet. For now there is only the river and the dark, and something beloved being carried slowly out of reach. So follow the water for a while, because that is where the story goes now, out onto the current with the sealed chest, away from the town and the terrible feast and the brother standing in the emptied hall. Follow it the way you would follow a leaf you dropped into the river as a child, watching it turn and slide and grow small, unable to call it back. The chest floated low in the water, heavy with its cedar and its lead, and the king it held. But the river is strong when the flood is in it, and it carried the weight easily. It bore the chest out from the bank and into the deep middle of the channel, where the water moves fastest and most smoothly, and there the current took it fully and made it its own. Down the whole length of the country the chest traveled, and the country did not know. It passed towns like the one you are lying in tonight, little clusters of mud brick houses with their flat roofs and their date palms and their lamps going out one by one. It passed people asleep on those roofs, closer to the passing king than they would ever know, dreaming their own small dreams, while the great grief of the land drifted by below them in the dark. It passed cattle standing in the shallows and herons folded up on one leg among the reeds. It passed shrines and landing places and the mouths of canals. All of it slept, and the chest went by, and none of them woke. Think of how long a night is, lying awake in it, and then think of a whole night spent moving. The chest went through the early dark, when the last workers were still walking home along the dikes and the first lamps were still lit. It went through the deep middle of the night, when even the dogs had gone quiet and the only sound anywhere was the water. It went through the cold, small hours, when the mist gathers low over the river and the stars are at their brightest and hardest. And it went on still as those stars began to fade toward the gray edge of a morning it would not stop for. Hour after hour of dark water, the town lights slipping past and falling behind, the banks changing shape and staying the same, the current never once slackening its slow, certain pull toward the sea. That is the journey the story asks you to feel. Not a moment of loss, but a long night of it, patient and unhurried and complete. There is a particular loneliness to a thing that moves through the sleeping world unseen, and you can feel it here if you let yourself, though there is nothing frightening in it, only a deep, quiet sadness, the sadness of a beloved thing carried away in the night with no one to see it go. The river did not hurry and did not slow. It only carried, the way it has always carried, the way it is carrying its own wide sound up to your roof at this very moment. On and on through the dark, the sleeping king went, north with the water, past all the length of the green land, toward the place where the river at last lets go of its burden and gives itself to the sea. And in time the chest came to the sea. The fresh brown river water spread and thinned into the wide salt green, and the current that had carried the chest so far loosened its hold, and the beautiful cedar box passed out beyond the mouths of the river into open water that no one in that country knew the far side of. It drifted on the sea now, lifted and set down by the long, slow swells, no longer traveling any road that led home. The stars wheeled over it. The nights passed. The chest went where the water willed, and the water willed it north and east, along coasts of a different kind, toward a far shore where the people spoke another tongue and had never heard the name of the gentle king who slept within the wood. There, at last, the chest came to rest. It grounded gently on a strange shore in the shallows below a coast that was not the coast of the river country at all. And here the story does one of the tender, strange things that old stories do, the kind of turn that makes a myth feel like a dream. For where the chest came to rest, a small tree was growing, only a sapling then, a young thing rooted close to the water. And as the chest lay against it, the tree began to grow around it. It grew the way the story needs it to grow, quietly and over a long time, the way real trees grow, so slowly you can never catch them at it. Its trunk swelled and reached and closed. Year upon year it thickened, and as it thickened it took the cedar chest into itself, folding the beautiful box and the king inside it deep into the living wood, until there was no chest to be seen at all, only a tree, a tall and healthy and fragrant tree, standing on a far northern shore, with a god asleep at its heart, and not a soul in the world the wiser. The tree grew tall. It grew straight and strong and sweet-smelling, until it was the finest tree on that whole coast, the kind of tree that makes people stop and look up. And in time it caught the eye of the king of that far place, the way a beautiful thing catches the eye of a king, and he wanted it. He had it cut down. Its branches were trimmed away, and its great trunk was carried to his house, and there it was set up as a pillar to hold the roof of his hall, a strong and lovely column of fragrant wood, the pride of the building. And so Osiris came to rest a second time inside a made thing, first the chest and now the pillar, both of them beautiful, both of them holding him hidden away from everyone who had ever loved him. The king of that far country walked past the pillar every day and leaned no doubt against its smooth wood and never once dreamed what slept inside it. Feasts were held in that hall. Lamps were lit and put out. A whole household lived its life around the silent column, and at the center of the column, still and sealed and unknowing, was the gentle king of the river, carried the length of a country and across a sea, and hidden at last in the trunk of a tree in a stranger's house, lost to all the world. You have followed the water a long way tonight, from the dark bank where the chest was given to the river, all the way to the far shore and the growing tree and the pillar in the hall. It is a long, slow journey, and it was meant to be, because the story wants you to feel the distance, to feel how far the beloved thing has gone and how completely it has vanished. No one who loved Osiris knows where he is. No one is looking, not yet, because no one yet even knows for certain that he is gone. He is simply absent from the world, hidden in fragrant wood on a coast without a name, while the river runs on below your roof and the night goes on and the stars turn slowly over everything. Let the chapter rest there, in that far quiet hall, with the pillar standing in the lamplight and the king asleep within it. Somewhere far to the south, in the green country he taught to be gentle, someone is about to learn that he is gone, and to begin the long searching that the rest of this night belongs to. But that is the next part of the story, and it can wait. For now there is only the far tree made into a far pillar, and the deep hush around it, and you, drifting a little further from the day with every slow turn of the water. Rest here a while. The story will still be here when you come back to it. Far to the south, in the green country that Osiris had taught to be gentle, the morning came as mornings always come, whether or not the world has changed in the night. The sun lifted off the fields. The mist drew back from the water. The people rose and went to their work, and for a little while nothing seemed different at all, because grief takes time to travel, and the worst news moves more slowly than the river that carried it. But Isis knew. She knew the way a wife knows, before anyone comes to tell her that her husband has not come home. The place where he should have been was empty, and the emptiness had a weight to it, and she felt that weight settle over her in the quiet of the house before a single word was spoken. Then the words came, as words do, carried by frightened people who had been at the feast, who had seen the beautiful chest and the lid come down and the sealed thing carried out into the dark. And Isis understood that Osiris was gone, and that his own brother had taken him, and that no one knew where. Her grief was quiet. That is the first thing to know about it, and the truest. It was not a grief of tearing and crying out, though anyone would have forgiven her that. It was the deeper kind, the kind that goes very still, the grief of someone who cannot even find the body to lay it down and mourn it properly. There is a particular sorrow in that, in being denied the small, hard comforts of mourning, the washing and the wrapping and the last long look. Osiris was not dead in her arms. He was simply gone, somewhere out in the wide world, and until she found him, she could not even begin to grieve him the way the dead are meant to be grieved. So she did what love does when it cannot yet do anything else. She prepared herself to look. She cut her hair. In that country, and in the years and years of that country that came after, cutting the hair was the sign of a mourner, and Isis, who knew the true names of things and the deep meanings under them, gave herself over to the sign fully. She put off whatever she had worn as a queen and put on the plain clothes of sorrow. She made herself small and quiet and ready for a long road, the way you make yourself ready for a journey you know will not be short. And then she went out from the house and down to the river, that same white river, and she began to walk. She walked the length of the land. Understand what that means before the story hurries past it, because the story will not hurry, and neither should you. It means she went from landing place to landing place along the whole course of the water, and at each one she stopped, and she asked. She asked the fishermen mending their nets in the gray of the morning. She asked the women filling their jars at the bank. She asked the children who played in the shallows, and the old men who sat in the doorways, and the boatmen who knew the river better than anyone. Have you seen a chest of cedar on the water? Did anything pass this way in the night? Do you know? Has anyone told you? Did you hear? And she moved on, and asked again, and moved on. It is slow, that kind of searching. It is the slowest thing there is. Each question is a small hope, and each answer that is no is that small hope quietly set down, and then you pick up the next one and carry it to the next person and set it down again. Landing after landing, town after town, day after day. The river ran beside her the whole way, wide and patient and unhurried, carrying its water north exactly as it had carried the chest, and Isis walked against nothing and toward nothing certain, only forward, only on, because forward was the one direction that might someday end in finding him. And she was not alone. This is the tender heart of this chapter, and it is worth resting in. Her sister Nephthys came to her and walked with her. Nephthys, who was sister to Isis and sister to Set both, gentle where Set was hard, who had stood a little apart at the feasts and seen more than she had ever said. Whatever was between Nephthys and her fierce brother, she did not stand with him now. She took her place beside her grieving sister, and the two women searched together, one sorrow shared between two hearts, which does not half the sorrow but does half the loneliness of it, and that is no small thing on a long road. Picture the two of them walking through the long nights. That is when you can see them most clearly in the dark, because the dark is where this whole story lives. The moon comes up over the river and lays a road of silver on the moving water, and two women walk along the bank beneath it, saying little, because after a while there is little left to say. The reeds whisper. A nightbird calls once and goes quiet. Somewhere a village sleeps, all its lamps put out, all its people trusting the world to still be there in the morning, the very sleep that Osiris had given them. And past the edge of that sleeping village walk the two who have lost the one who gave it. They do not wake anyone. They do not stop. They only go on, side by side, through the hush. And in the long days, too. The sun climbs, and the heat comes down, and the road shimmers, and still they walk, and still Isis asks her patient questions at every landing. There is a kind of strength that does not look like strength. It does not lift great weights or strike great blows. It only refuses, quietly and without ceasing, to stop. That was the strength of Isis. She did not know if she would ever find him. She had no sign, no certainty, no promise from anyone that the road she walked led anywhere but further into loss. And she walked it anyway, and asked her questions anyway, and rose each morning and went on anyway, because to stop was to accept that he was gone forever, and that was the one thing her love would not let her do. There were kindnesses along the way, as there always are on a long road, small ones, the kind that keep a searcher going. A place at a fire, a share of someone's bread, a gentle word from a stranger who did not know who these two grieving women were, only that they were grieving, and that grief asks for softness. Isis, who had taught the people so many deep crafts in the good years, received now the plainer gifts of shelter and food and human company, and took them gratefully, because even the strongest heart needs to be carried a little sometimes, and even the one who searches needs, now and then, to be found. The river narrowed and widened and narrowed again. The land changed and stayed the same. The two sisters went on, north with the water, following the road the chest had taken, though they did not yet know it was the road, and the story goes with them at the pace of their own tired feet, patient, tender, refusing to give up. Somewhere ahead of them, far to the north, past the mouths of the river and across a stretch of sea, a fragrant pillar stood in a stranger's hall with a gentle king asleep inside it. Isis did not know that yet. She only knew to keep walking, and to keep asking, and to keep her small hope lit against the dark, the way you keep a lamp lit against a long night. Let the chapter close there, with the two women still on the road, still walking, still unfinished. The searching is not over. But the one who searches is exactly the kind of soul you would want looking for you if ever you were lost, and there is a deep comfort in that, in being sought by love that will not rest. Rest yourself, though. You are allowed to. The searching in this story is hers to do, not yours, and she will not falter while you drift. She will be walking still when you come back to her. The long road ended, as long roads do, not with a trumpet but with a turning. One landing led to another, and one asking led to the next, and at last the river gave out into the sea, and word led Isis across the water to the far northern city where the fragrant pillar stood. She did not arrive knowing she had arrived. Finding is like that. You cross the very threshold you have walked 10,000 steps to reach, and for a moment you do not even know that the searching is nearly done. It was a city of another country, on a coast that was not the coast of the Riverland, where the people spoke a tongue that was not her own, and had never heard the name of the gentle king. And in that city stood the house of its king, and in the great hall of that house stood a pillar, tall and smooth and sweet-smelling, holding up the roof, admired by all who passed beneath it, and no one in all that country knew what slept within the wood. Isis knew, or she came to know, the way she came to know all hidden things, by the deep, quiet sense that lived in her, the wisdom that could feel the true shape of a thing under its surface. Something in that hall called to her across the crowd and the strangeness, and she followed the calling to its root and found the pillar and understood. But knowing is not the same as having. She could not simply walk into a foreign king's hall and demand his finest pillar and the secret it held. So Isis, who had been a queen, made herself small again, the way she had made herself small for the road. She took a humble place in that household. She sat by the well where the women of the house came to draw water, quiet and plain and kind, and she began gently to be useful and to be trusted and to be loved. For that is the other power of Isis, alongside her knowledge of names and spells. It is the plainer magic of goodness, which is slower than the other kind, but stronger in the end. She was gentle with the people of that house. She was gentle above all with its children, and the queen of that far country came to see that there was something rare in the quiet stranger who had come to sit by the well, something that could not be named, but could be felt, the way warmth is felt without being seen. Little by little, the household drew close to her. Little by little, her true nature shone through the plainness she had wrapped around herself, the way a lamp shows through thin linen. The days in that far house had their own slow shape, and Isis let herself be carried by it while she waited. In the cool of the morning, she sat by the well with the other women and drew water and heard their talk in a tongue that had been strange to her and grew less strange with every passing day. She learned the names of the children and the small troubles of the house. She was kind to the least of them and asked nothing in return, and kindness that asks for nothing is a rare thing anywhere, and it did not go unnoticed. All the while the great pillar stood in the hall a few steps away, sweet-smelling and admired, holding up the roof, holding up her whole reason for being there, and she did not once let her longing show. She only waited, and was useful, and was patient, the way she had been patient on the road, because she had come too far to spoil the finding now by reaching for it too soon. And there came a night, the way there does in old stories, when the disguise fell away and the king and the queen of that place understood at last that they had sheltered no ordinary woman but a goddess, one of the great ones from the green country to the south, come among them in sorrow and in search. Imagine the hush of that understanding. Imagine the king and queen standing before the quiet stranger they had housed and fed, seeing her truly for the first time, and feeling the awe that comes when the divine has been sitting at your table all along and you did not know. They were afraid, perhaps, in the way people are rightly afraid before something far greater than themselves. But Isis had come among them with gentleness, and gentleness was what met her now. They asked her what she wished, and she wished for only one thing. She asked them for the pillar. You can feel the whole long night bending toward this moment. All the walking, all the asking, all the small hopes set down and picked up again. The cut hair and the plain clothes and the endless river road, all of it narrowing at last to a single fragrant column of wood in a stranger's hall. They gave it to her. Of course they gave it to her. What is a pillar, even the finest one, beside the wish of a goddess who has crossed a sea in grief to find it? The roof was propped some other way, and the great sweet-smelling column was taken down and given into her hands. And Isis opened it. The story is quiet here, and you should be quiet with it, because what she found is the still center of the whole night. She worked away the wood, the years of grown trunk that had folded around the beautiful chest, until the chest itself came clear, the cedar box that Set had made to fit one man that had been given to the river a whole world ago. She opened the chest, and there, inside it, still and whole, was Osiris. He was not changed. That is the mercy the story gives, and it gives it gently. After the river and the sea, and the long years inside the tree, he lay in the cedar as he had lain the moment the lid came down, whole, unspoiled, only still, only sleeping the deep sleep that is not sleep. Isis looked down at the face she had walked the length of a country and across a sea to see again. And here, at last, she could do the thing that grief had been denied her all this while. Here she could mourn him. She bent over him and she gave him her sorrow, all of it, the sorrow she had carried so quietly for so long, and there is no shame in it and no loudness in it, only a wife who has found her husband at last and is allowed, finally, to weep. But Isis was never only her grief. She was wisdom and craft and will, and she did not mean to leave him in a stranger's country, however kindly that country had come to treat her. He belonged to the riverland, to the black soil and the green fields, and the people who still, perhaps, did not fully know he was gone. So she made ready to bring him home. She took the chest and its precious sleeping burden, and she went down to the water, and she began the long journey back, southward now, back toward the country of the flood. And she carried him the way you carry the most precious and most fragile thing you have ever held. The old stories say she cradled the chest as a mother cradles a sleeping child, close against her, careful of every movement of the water, watchful through every hour. Picture that, and let it be the picture you rest on. A woman on a boat on a wide, dark sea, holding a cedar chest against her heart, bringing home the one she had refused to stop looking for, while the stars turn slowly over the water and the far city falls away behind her into the night. The searching, at least, was over. The finding was done. Whatever the stories still had to give and to take, this much was true and could not be untrue again. She had walked into the dark after him, and she had not stopped. And she had found him, and she was carrying him home. Let the chapter rest there, on the boat, on the dark and gentle sea, on the wife and the sleeping king and the slow way south. There is more night ahead, and not all of it is easy. but this hour is hers, and it is a good hour, and you may lie in it a while longer before the story moves again. She came home across the water, and she brought him back to the green land, and the first thing she needed for him was rest. Not her own rest, though she had earned it past all telling. His. She needed a quiet place to lay the chest down, somewhere hidden and safe, where she could gather her strength and her deep knowledge and begin the great slow work of making him whole. So she carried him into the marshes. You should picture those marshes, because they are the gentlest hiding place in the world, and the story means them to feel like safety. Where the river spreads out and slows and loses itself among the reeds, there is a country of green water and tall rushes and soft black mud, a maze with no straight paths, where the tracks close behind you as you make them, and a thing hidden is hidden well. Birds nest there in their thousands. The papyrus grows higher than a person's head and bends in the smallest wind. The light comes down green and broken through the reeds, and the water is still, and the whole place breathes a deep, wet quiet. There Isis brought the chest, deep into the thickest and most tangled part of it, and there she laid it down in the reeds, in the hush, to rest. And for a while it was resting. For a while there was peace of a kind, the exhausted peace that comes after a long searching is done, before the next hard thing begins. Isis kept her watch over the hidden chest and mourned in secret and turned her wise mind toward the work ahead, the work of calling her husband back from stillness. The marsh kept its secret well. No path led to it. No one who did not already know could ever have found the place where the gentle king lay waiting to be made whole. Nights in the marsh had a sound all their own, and Isis learned it the way you learn any place you keep watch over. The water moved without seeming to move, a small dark shifting among the roots. The reeds touched one another in the least breath of air and made a dry whisper that rose and fell and never quite stopped. Frogs called and went quiet and called again. Now and then a heron lifted off from somewhere close by, a slow, heavy beating of wings in the dark, and settled again a little further off. It was a good place to grieve in, if any place is, because it was patient, and it kept its own counsel, and it did not hurry her. She sat with the chest through the long hours, and gathered herself, and let the marsh hold the two of them the way the reeds hold the still water, close and green and safe. And for a while, a real while, it was. But the world had a Set in it still, and Set did not sleep as easily as the country he had wronged. He was a hunter, among the other things he was. The red desert was his, and the wild things were his, and he loved the chase, and he went out often into the night with his hounds and his spear under the moon. There is an old truth in that the one who cannot rest in the daylight goes hunting in the dark, and Set went hunting in the dark. He knew by now that the chest had come back. Perhaps he had heard. Perhaps he had only felt it, the way you feel a thing you fear has come near. And so his hunting had a second purpose under it, a watchfulness, a searching of his own, though what he searched for he could not have said aloud. The moon was up. That is the detail the old story keeps, and it is worth keeping, because it turns what happened from a plan into an accident, and an accident is somehow colder than a plan. Set did not track the chest to its hiding place by cunning. He did not follow Isis or trick her or force the secret from anyone. He was simply out under the full moon, hunting, going where the hunt led him, deep into places most people never went. And the hunt led him into the marshes. And there, by pure and terrible chance, in the flat white light of the moon that shows everything and hides nothing, he came upon the chest. Understand what the moon did then, and why the chapter is named for it. It was the moon that showed him. The same soft light that had lain like a silver road on the water while Isis walked the riverbank in her grief. The same gentle moon under which the two sisters had gone on through the long nights. That same moon now fell upon the hidden chest among the reeds, and gave it up to the one who should never have found it. There is no cruelty in the moon. It only shines. But it shone on the wrong thing that night, and Set was standing where its light fell. What he did then, the story tells plainly, and then it lets the loudness go out of it at once, because this is a night for sleeping and not for dwelling in horror. Set opened the chest. He found his brother whole, the very thing that Isis had crossed the sea to keep whole. And in a rage that had never once cooled all the years the chest was gone, he made certain, this time, that no single searching could ever undo his work again. He took the body of Osiris and he cut it into many pieces, and he carried those pieces out across the whole length of the land, and he scattered them, one here and one there, the length and breadth of the country, into the river and the fields and the far places, so that they should never be gathered, so that no wife, however faithful, could ever again walk one road and find one chest and bring one husband home. And then the story lets the night go quiet again. This is the strange grace of an old tale like this one. The worst has been doubled. The grief that was so hard-won a piece is broken open again, and the beloved thing that was found and carried home and laid down to rest is torn apart and thrown to the winds. And yet the story does not turn loud. It does not linger over the horror or wring your heart with it. It simply sets the terrible fact down, the way Set set down the scattered pieces, and then it grows still and resolved and turns its face toward what comes next. Because here is the thing that Set did not understand, for all his cunning and all his rage. He thought that to scatter a thing is to end it. He thought that what is broken into many pieces and thrown across a whole country is a thing beyond all putting back together. But he had not reckoned with Isis, and he had never once understood her, because he was a hunter and she was something else entirely. Patient where he was hasty, tender where he was hard, and possessed of a love that did not know how to stop. He had made her search harder. He had not made her stop. A whole river to walk again, a whole land to comb, piece by scattered piece, and Isis would walk it. Of course she would walk it. She had walked into the dark after him once already and not turned back, and she would do it again. And this time her gentle sister would walk it with her from the very start. But that walking belongs to the part of the night that comes after this one. For now, let the grief settle without turning loud, the way grief does in the deep of the night when there is nothing to be done until morning. The marsh is quiet again. The moon that showed the hunter has moved on across the sky and gone down toward the far edge of the world. The reeds stand still in the windless dark, and somewhere in the green country a woman is learning, for the second time, that the one she loves has been taken from her and is already, quietly, beginning to plan the long, tender labor of gathering him back. Rest here, where the loudness has gone out and only the resolve remains. The story knows exactly where it is going, and it is going, in the end, toward morning. You may trust it that far and let yourself drift the rest of the way down. So she began again. That is the first thing to know about this hour of the night, and it is the thing worth resting your whole weight on. She had found him once and lost him again, and a lesser love would have broken there, would have sat down in the reeds and given up the world. Isis did not sit down. She rose, and her sister rose with her, and the two of them set out to do the one thing that Set had believed no one could ever do. They set out to gather him back, piece by scattered piece, from the whole long length of the land. Think for a moment about how large a task that was, and then let the story carry the largeness for you, because the story is patient and does not mind. Set had not hidden the pieces in one place where a searcher might comb the ground and find them. He had thrown them wide, one here and one there, into the river and the fields and the far dry places, the length and breadth of the country, so that the finding of one told you nothing of where the next might lie. To gather them was to walk the whole land over again. It was to search not one road but every road, not one landing but all of them, and to do it slowly, and to do it grieving, and to do it without any promise that the road would end. And that is exactly what the two sisters did. They took to the water, and they took to the banks, and they went. Isis and Nephthys, side by side as they had been side by side on the first long search, only now the searching had a different shape. Before, they had looked for one whole man. Now they looked for the parts of him, and every finding was a small grief of its own, and every finding was also, strangely, a small mercy, because each piece gathered was a piece that would not be lost forever. So they went on, up the river and down it, into the marshes and out to the edges of the fields, asking the water and the reeds and the quiet places to give up what they held. And here is the gentleness in it, the thing that keeps this from being only a story of sorrow. At every place where a piece of Osiris was found, the two sisters stopped. They did not snatch it up and hurry on. They paused. They knelt. They mourned him there, in that spot, on that ground, the way you would pause over anything beloved that the world had taken and given partly back. And then, before they went on, they marked the place as holy. They made it sacred with their grief and their care, so that the ground itself would remember. A piece of the gentle king had rested here, and so here was no longer ordinary earth. Here was a place where the divine had touched down and been mourned and been loved. Do you see what that does? Across a whole country, over a long enough search. it makes the land itself into a memory of him. Everywhere the sister stopped, a holy place was born, a shrine, a spot the people would come to know and keep and honor. And in the years that followed, and the long ages after those years, these were the places the living would journey to. They will leave their homes and travel the river to stand where a piece of Osiris had been found and mourned, to be near the gentle king in the ground that remembered him. The scattering that Set had meant as an ending became, through the patient love of two women, a scattering of holy places across the whole face of the land, more shrines than one grave could ever have been. Among all of them, one would grow more sacred than the rest. In the years to come, the city that the people called Abydos would become the holiest ground of Osiris in all the country, the great destination, the place a soul most longed to lie near when its own night came at last. For thousands of years, the living would make their way to Abydos, would carry their dead there or wish themselves buried in its sand, would come as pilgrims to the city of the gentle king. All of that, every prayer and every journey of all those ages, began here, in the dark, with two grieving sisters walking the river and stopping to mark the ground wherever love told them to stop. But do not let the grandness of what it became pull you out of the smallness of what it was. In the moment, in the doing, it was not a great holy thing. It was two tired women on a long river looking for the pieces of someone they loved. Picture them at it. The boat moving slowly along a green bank in the low light. One of them steps down into the shallows where the reeds grow thick and searches, and then goes very still because she has found something. And the other comes to her, and they kneel together in the mud and the water, and for a while they are simply two sisters weeping quietly over a small found thing, in a country that has not yet learned to be sorry, in the great hush of a night that holds them, without hurrying them. Then they gather themselves. Then they mark the place. Then they go on to the next. Landing after landing, marsh after marsh, field after field. It was the long, loving labor of putting a broken thing back together, and there is no hurried way to do such work, and the sisters did not try to hurry it. They let it take exactly as long as it took. They let each piece be mourned as fully as it needed. There is a lesson folded into that, quite enough to sleep on, that some things cannot be rushed and should not be, that the mending of what matters is slow by its very nature, and that the slowness is not a failure of the work, but the shape of it. Isis did not want the gathering to be quick. She wanted it to be whole, and whole things are made one careful piece at a time. Nephthys stayed beside her through all of it. This is worth saying plainly, because it is easy to let the sister slip into the background of a tale like this, and she does not deserve to. She had been at Isis's side on the first search, and she was at her side on the second, sharing the labor and the sorrow both. When one sister's strength wore thin, the other's held. When one knelt too long over a found piece and could not rise, the other lifted her. That is what a sister is for, in the deep of a long grief, and Nephthys was that, faithfully, mile after mile of dark water, without once turning back toward the brother whose rage had made all this necessary. And slowly, slowly, over that whole long labor, the pieces came together. Not all at once, and not easily, but surely, the way the flood fills the fields, not in a rush, but in a rising you can hardly see from hour to hour, and yet cannot deny by morning. What had been scattered was being gathered. What had been thrown to the whole wide country was being drawn back, piece by mourned and honored piece, into one place and one care. The land was giving him back to her, a little at a time, and she was receiving him with a patience that never once ran dry. Let the chapter close there, on the long river and the slow gathering, on two sisters who would not stop. The work is not finished in this hour, but it is well begun, and it is in the gentlest and most faithful hands that ever took up a task. Somewhere ahead, the pieces will be enough, and other hands, wise and quiet, will help make what is gathered whole again. For now it is enough to know that the mending has started, that love is out on the dark water doing its patient work, and that nothing is truly lost that is being sought like this. Rest in the gathering. You do not have to help. You only have to trust that the ones who are searching will not fail, and then you may let yourself drift on the slow water with them, a little further down toward morning. The pieces were gathered at last, all that patient river labor come to its quiet end, and now the story turns toward the strangest and most tender thing in all of it, the making whole. It could not be done by grief alone, however faithful, and it could not be done by one pair of hands, however loving. This last work would take the oldest words and the oldest crafts, and it would take help, the good help of those who knew things Isis herself did not know. So into the story, in the deep of the night, come two of the quiet great ones, and the work begins. First comes Anubis. You know him if you know anything of that far country, the one with the head of a jackal, dark and watchful, the god who keeps the door between the living and the dead. He was the one who understood the body and its keeping. He knew what the desert jackals knew, the ways of the dry places and the still forms in them, and out of that knowing he had made a craft, gentle and exact, the craft of tending a body so that it would not pass away into nothing, but would be kept, honored, held in a shape that grief could recognize. And it was Anubis who took the gathered pieces of Osiris, and it was Anubis who bound them. Sit with what that means, because it is a first, and firsts have their own hush. There had never before been a body wrapped and kept this way. Anubis took clean linen, long strips of it, and he wound the body of Osiris in it with a care past all telling, binding the gathered pieces back into one, wrapping the gentle king the way you would wrap something you meant to keep forever and hand to no darkness. It was slow work, and it was reverent work, and every wrapping was a kind of prayer. When it was done, there lay, for the first time in the history of the world, a body made ready to endure, bound and honored, and whole in its linen. Everything that the people of that land would ever do afterward for their own beloved dead, all the long care they would take, all the wrappings and the keepings across all the ages began on this night, with this body in these jackal god hands. Picture the quiet of that room, wherever the story keeps it, deep in some sheltered place away from every eye. A single small light, perhaps, and the smell of clean linen, and the smell of the resins and the sweet things the craft asks for. The dark god working without hurry, his hands sure, laying each strip of cloth exactly where it should go. Isis nearby, watching the tending of the husband she had gathered so far and so long to bring to this table. Nothing loud, nothing rushed. Only the slow reverent labor going on and on into the night, wrapping and smoothing and binding, until the gentle king lay ready and kept, and the first great mercy the country would ever offer its dead had been made real in the dark. But a kept body is still a still body, and the story wanted more than keeping. It wanted breath. And for breath you need words, the right words, the deep old words of power, and those belonged to Thoth. He was the scribe of the great ones, the keeper of writing and reckoning and every kind of knowing, the one who held the words that could reach into the shape of things and change them. Where Anubis knew the body, Thoth knew the word, and the word is older than the body and stronger. He came into that quiet place carrying the oldest healing speech there is, the words that were words before people had learned to write them down, and he gave them to the work. He lent them to Isis and to the making whole. And then Isis herself, everything she was, came to its point in this hour. All her wisdom, all her craft, all the deep knowing of true names and hidden shapes that had let her feel a god sleeping inside a stranger's pillar, all of it she gathered now, and bent over the rapt and silent form of her husband. She spoke the words that Thoth had lent her, and she spoke words that were her own, older than lending, born straight out of a love that had walked the length of 2 countries, and would not be told that the dead stay dead. She worked her great magic over him in the hush of the night, patient and sure, calling, the way you call very softly to someone you are trying to wake without frightening. And the breath came back. Be quiet with this. The whole night has been walking toward it, and it deserves your stillness. Over the wrapped body, in the deep of the dark, the breath returned to Osiris. Not the full loud life of before, not the living king striding his green fields in the sun. Something gentler and stranger than that, something that had never been before and would frame the whole understanding of that country ever after. For one night, he was present again. The one who had been murdered and drifted the length of a river and slept inside a tree in a far country and been found and lost and scattered wide and gathered slowly back, breathed once more in the dark. He was neither wholly dead nor wholly living. He was there. He was known. He was above all loved, and he could feel that he was loved in the small restored space of that single night. There is a kind of quiet that only comes after very long trouble, and that is the quiet that filled this hour. All the walking was behind it. All the water, all the asking, all the small hopes set down and picked up again, all the gathering of scattered pieces from the whole face of the land, everything had led here to a still form on a table, and old words spoken over it, and a breath, at last, returning. The night did not announce it. The reeds outside did not stir. The world did not know that in one hidden place the greatest of losses was being answered, softly, by the greatest of loves. It only happened the way the deepest things happen, in the dark, between a few faithful souls with no one to see and no need of anyone. Think what that night was for Isis. She had searched so long and grieved so long and labored so long over the pieces of him, and here, for these few dark hours, she had him back. Not forever. She surely knew it was not forever, because she knew the true shape of things and would not have lied to herself about this one. But for now, for tonight, the face she had crossed a sea to find was a breathing face again, and the husband she had cradled as a sleeping child was present with her in a way past all her hope. Whatever passed between them in that restored night, the story keeps mostly to itself, and rightly, because some hours are too tender to be told and are only to be honored. It is enough to know that they had it. One night, gathered out of all that loss. One night of breath and presence and nearness, bought with everything she had. And you are allowed to sit inside that night with them, warm and hushed and complete, and this is perhaps the gentlest place the whole story will set you down. Everything loud is behind you now. The chest and the river and the moon that showed the hunter, all of it is past, and what remains in this hour is only the quiet, lamp-lit fact of a thing restored. A body kept by careful hands. Old words spoken with love. A breath returned in the dark. There is no danger in this room, no dread, no waiting for a blow. There is only the deep completeness of a night that was searched for across a whole life and finally, briefly, held. Let the chapter rest there, in the restored and breathing dark, with the three of them, the jackal-headed keeper and the scribe of the old words and the wife whose love did the impossible, gathered around the gentle king who is, for this one night, present again. The night gave them this. It asks nothing back. You may lie in the same warm hush they lie in, knowing that what was broken has been made whole enough to breathe, and that love, given long enough and faithfully enough, can reach even into the deep places and call something back. Rest in that. It is true in this story, and it is a good thing to carry down toward sleep. Out of that one restored night, something began. This is the quiet turning of the whole story, and it happens in the softest possible way, the way the most important things often do, without noise, without anyone declaring it. From the single night that Osiris breathed again, Isis conceived a child. All the loss of the story, all the searching and the grief and the gathering, folded now around one small new thing, a hope carried in secret, the whole future of everything to come held safe inside her. The gentle king was passing beyond the reach of the living world. But he had left one thing behind him in it, and she carried it, and she would keep it. And keeping it meant hiding. Set was still in the world, and Set was still what he had always been, the hunter, the one who could not rest, the brother whose rage had cut a body into pieces and thrown them to the winds. If he had done that to end his brother, what would he do to end his brother's son, the child who might one day stand against him and claim what he had stolen? Isis knew the danger with the same clear knowing she brought to everything. She knew that the child must be born far from any eye that might carry word to Set, and raised far from any road he hunted. So she did the thing she had done before, when she needed the world not to find what she was keeping. She went into the marshes. You know those marshes by now, because the story has brought you into them once already, and it means the return to feel like coming back to a safe room in the dark. Where the river spreads and slows and loses itself among the reeds, where the papyrus stands higher than a person's head, and the water lies still and green, and the black mud takes no lasting print of any foot, there Isis hid herself away. It is a place made for hiding. The paths close behind you as you make them. The reeds fold back over any track. A thing set down deep in that green tangle is a thing the world cannot find unless it already knows where to look, and no one knew where Isis had gone, and that was exactly as she wished it. There, in the deep of the reeds, she bore her son. Picture the smallness and the quiet of it. No palace, no gathered court, no proclamation carried out across the land. Only a woman alone in the marsh, in the hush and the green light, bringing her child into the world in secret, with the water moving softly among the roots and the tall rushes standing close around her like walls that no enemy could breach because no enemy could find them. It was the humblest birth for the most important child, and there is a rightness in that the story clearly loves, that the hope of everything should begin so hidden, so small, so gently guarded in the reeds. Let yourself really be in that place for a moment, because it is one of the kindest places the whole story has to offer. The papyrus stood tall and still in the windless dark. The water lay flat and black and gave back the little light there was. The night birds had gone to their roosts among the reeds, and the frogs had quieted, and the whole wide marsh held its breath around the new small life at the heart of it. There was mud, soft and cool, and the green smell of growing things, and the deeper smell of the still water. And in the middle of all that green hush lay a baby, new to the world, and over him bent his mother, and for this one moment nothing in the whole land knew where they were, or wished them any harm. It was as safe as anywhere had ever been. The marsh had swallowed them kindly, and the kindness held. The boy was Horus, the falcon, the far-seeing one, the child in whom his father's kingship waited to wake. But all of that was for later, for the years still folded up ahead. On this night he was only what any newborn is, small and new and wholly dependent, and his mother was only what any mother is over such a child, fierce and tender and sleepless with watching. Whatever great destiny lay coiled inside him, it lay very quietly for now, the way everything in this hour lies quiet. He was a baby in the reeds, and Isis was his mother, and she guarded him. And oh, how she guarded him! All the strength she had spent on the long searching, all the patient will that had walked 2 countries and gathered a scattered king, she turned now upon this one small task, the keeping of one small life. She kept him hidden. She kept him fed. She kept her ears open through the long marsh nights for any sound that did not belong, any splash or footfall or breath of wind that might mean the hunter had come near. She raised him through his small years the way any mother raises a child through the dark, by never quite sleeping, by watching when he slept, by putting her own body between him and every danger the night might hold. The greatest of the goddesses became, in the marsh, simply a mother guarding a son, and there is no smaller or larger thing than that. And she did it alone, mostly, in the way that the deepest keeping is always a little lonely. There was no court around her now, no household drawing close by the well, no sister at her side on a long road. There was only the marsh and the child, and the long chain of nights to be gotten through one at a time. She learned to move quietly, to make no more sound than the water made. She learned which noises of the marsh were only the marsh and which might be something else, and she listened for the difference the way only a watching mother can listen. When the child was hungry, she fed him. When he was frightened by the dark, she soothed him. When at last he slept, she did not let herself sleep too deeply, but kept some part of herself awake and turned outward, toward the reeds, toward the paths, toward any harm that might come feeling its way in. This was her whole life now, and she gave herself to it wholly, because everything that had ever mattered to her was small and breathing in her arms. The nights in that hiding place had their own long shape, and Isis learned every hour of them. The reeds whispered their dry, endless whisper. The water shifted among the roots. Birds she could not see moved in the dark and went still. And through it all, the child slept, or woke and was soothed, and slept again, and his mother sat close over him in the green dark, keeping the watch that mothers keep. Sometimes, surely, the old grief came to her in those hours, the memory of the gentle king who would never see the boy grow, and she carried that too, quietly, the way she carried everything, without letting it wake the child. She had lost so much. She would not lose this. And so she watched, and the marsh held them both, and the years began, slowly, to pass. There is a great tenderness in leaving them here, and this is where the chapter means to lay you down. Not in danger, though danger is somewhere out in the wide world, hunting under its moon. Not in grief, though grief has walked every step of this story with them. Just here, in the safe green hush of the reeds, on a mother and a sleeping son, hidden well, guarded well, waiting for a morning that has not come yet but surely will. The falcon is small still. The reckoning with Set is far off still. For now there is only the marsh, and the still water, and the child asleep, and the woman who will not let the dark have him. So let the reeds close gently around them, and let the water lie still, and let the child sleep on in the arms of the one soul in all the world most fit to keep him. Nothing loud will happen here tonight. The hunter does not know this place. The paths have closed behind. The hope of everything is small and warm and breathing in the green dark, and its mother is awake and watching, and you are not needed for the watching. You may let your own eyes close the rest of the way. The child is safe. The mother is sure. The story is holding its breath very softly over the two of them, and it will still be holding them, safe among the reeds, when you come back to it. Rest now. The falcon sleeps, and so may you. There is a turn the story takes now that is gentler than anything that has come before it, and it is the turn that gives the whole long night its meaning. Osiris did not come back to the fields. Understand that plainly, because the story does not pretend otherwise, and there is more comfort in the truth of it than in any softer thing you could tell yourself. He did not rise from the marsh and take up his old crown and walk his green country again in the light of the sun. The night that his breath returned was one night, and it was enough, and it was not a beginning of the old life over again. It was a doorway. The gentle king passed through it, and he went where he was going, and where he was going was down into the great country beneath the world. That country had a name, and the name was the Duat. It is the place the sun goes when it leaves the sky, the deep land under everything, the country of the dead. And you might think, hearing that, of some cold and frightening place, some prison of shadow where the lost are kept. Let the story take that fear from you now, because that is not what the Duat became once Osiris was its king. He did not enter it as a captive. He entered it as a ruler. The one who had taught the living to be gentle became the one who ruled the dead gently, and the deep country changed under his kindness the way a house changes when a good person comes to live in it. It was still dark. It was still the far side of everything. But it was no longer only darkness. It was a kingdom now, and it had a king, and the king was the mildest soul the world had ever raised up. Think of what that means, and let it be a warm thought and not a fearful one. The person who waits for you at the end of the longest road, in the deepest and most unknown country there is not a stranger, and is not a judge who wishes you ill, and is not a cold power that does not care. He is the king who settled quarrels with words. He is the one who bent over the flood and taught the grain to grow. He is the gentle one, and he had gone into death ahead of everyone, and he had made a place there, and he was keeping it ready. Every soul that would ever have to make that crossing would be making it toward him. That is the great mercy folded into the center of this whole story, and you are allowed to rest your full weight on it tonight. And someone let the dead down to him. You know who, because you have met him already, on the night of the linen and the old care. Anubis, the jackal-headed one, the keeper of the door between the living and the dead, did not finish his work when he wrapped the body of the gentle king. That first tending had shown him the whole shape of his labor, and the labor went on. It was Anubis who went out to meet the newly dead, the ones who had just crossed over, frightened perhaps and uncertain in the new dark. And it was Anubis who took them by the hand, so to speak, and led them down the long way to the hall of his king. He was the guide. He knew every turning of the deep country, because he kept its store, and he brought the dead through it, gently, the way you would lead someone who could not yet see in a dim room, telling them the floor was even, telling them the way was safe. There was a hall down there, and in the hall a thing was done that lay at the very heart of what that country believed. The heart of each soul that came was weighed. Picture it not as a trial to be dreaded, but as a quiet reckoning, a still ceremony in a solemn and unhurried place. The heart of the newly dead was set upon a great balance, and against it was set the feather of what is right and true, the lightest thing there is. And if the heart was light, if the life behind it had been kind and fair and had not grown heavy with cruelty, then the balance held even, and the soul was welcomed. It passed the reckoning. It came through into the peace of the kingdom. into the presence of the gentle king, and it was home. The whole country arranged its hope around this hall. "Live so that your heart stays light," they told one another, "and when your night comes, you will be welcomed by the mild king who crossed before you." The gentle were welcomed. That was the promise, and Osiris was the keeper of it. And think for a moment about the ones who were welcomed, because that is where the comfort of this hour truly lives. A soul came down the long dark road, led by the jackal-headed one, and stood in the still hall, and the reckoning was done, and the heart was found light. What then? Then the far country opened to that soul, the way a door opens onto a familiar room. There was rest there, and quiet, and a kind of green peace not so far from the good fields of the living, only steadier, only safe, forever from flood and famine and loss. The gentle king had made a place where the kind could simply be near him, unhurried, unafraid, done at last with all the labor and the sorrow of the living days. No one who came through the reckoning was turned away into nothing. The light of heart were kept and welcomed and given rest in the presence of the mildest king there ever was. That was the whole hope of that country, folded into one quiet hall, and it is a hope soft enough to sleep on. And here is the last and strangest gentleness of this hour. The deep country was not only the destination of the dead, it was also the road of the sun. For each night, when Ra the sun god left the evening sky and the world went dark, he did not simply cease. He sailed. He went down into the Duat in his bark, his great boat of the night, and he journeyed through the same dark country hour by hour, the whole length of it, from the place where the sun goes down to the place where it will rise. 12 hours of dark water and deep land, and the sun god crossing it in his boat, exactly as you have been crossing this night hour by hour toward your own morning. And there, in that deep country, on that nightly voyage, Ra and Osiris met. The sun that dies each dusk passed through the kingdom of the king who had already died, and something in their meeting fed the world. The living sun and the still king, the traveler and the one who waits, touched in the dark middle of every single night, and out of that touching the sun took the strength to climb back into the morning. So there were two kings now in the deep country, in a manner of speaking, and they were not rivals but companions in the dark. Ra came through each night, moving, sailing, the great restless light that could not stay still. And Osiris did not move. He had already made his crossing. He had already gone all the way through the worst of it and come out a king on the far side, and now he simply waited there, steady, seated in his hall, the fixed point at the heart of the turning night. The sun passed and went on to its rising. The king stayed and kept his kingdom. And the dead came down, led by the jackal-headed one, to the mild ruler who had crossed before them and made the far country safe. And you may wonder, lying here in the dark, why the sun should need to make that crossing at all. Why the great light could not simply wait somewhere bright until the morning came. But that was never the way of it in that country's telling. The sun did not skip the dark. It went down into it, all the way down, through every one of the 12 hours, and it was renewed by the going. It met the still king in the deepest hour, and something passed between the traveler and the one who waited, and out of that meeting the tired light of the evening became the strong light of the dawn. Even the sun had to pass through the deep country to be made new. Even the sun. There is a quiet teaching folded into that, gentle enough to carry down toward sleep, that the dark is not the end of the light, but the place the light goes to be renewed, and that the crossing of a long night, hour by patient hour, is how the morning is earned. You are making such a crossing now. You need not fear the dark part of it. The sun makes the same passage every single night, and comes up gold every single morning, and so will you. Let the chapter rest there, in the deep and gentle kingdom under the world, and let it lay a very old comfort in your hands to carry down toward sleep. You have followed the gentle king through betrayal and river and loss, and the long labor of love, and this is where all of it was going. Not back to the fields, onward and downward, to a throne in the quiet country, to a hall where the kind are welcomed home, to a place that a good soul goes to be near the one who was gentlest of all. The sun will cross that country tonight while you sleep, and the king will wait in it as he always waits, steady in the dark. There is nothing to fear in that far land. Someone kind is keeping it. Rest in that knowledge the way you would rest in a warm house on a cold night, and let yourself drift a little further toward the morning that always comes. Now the story lifts back up out of the deep country and returns to the marsh and to the child hidden in the reeds, because that child did not stay a child. The years passed over the marsh the way years do, quietly and completely, and the boy grew. The small one who had slept guarded in the green dark grew into a straight and clear-eyed young one, and then into a man grown, and the falcon that had waited coiled inside him woke and spread. He was Horus now in his full strength, no longer only a hidden infant, but a claimant, the son of the gentle king, and there was a thing in the world that belonged to him and had been stolen, and he had come of age to ask for it back. For the throne of his father had never been set right. Remember how far back the wrong went. Set had murdered the gentle king and taken his place, and for all the long years of the searching and the gathering and the hiding, the wrong had simply stood, unanswered, in the world. The seed that should have been Osiris's, and then his son's, was held by the one who had stolen it by murder. Horus grew up knowing this the way you know the shape of your own face. The kingship of the living land was his by right, passed down from the gentle king to the gentle king's son, and it was in the hands of the hunter. So when he was grown, Horus did the thing the story had been waiting through all its long night for him to do. He went to claim what was his. But hear how he claimed it, because this matters, and it is part of why this story is a story you can sleep to and not one that will keep you awake. He did not simply take up a spear and go to settle it with blood in the dark. The reckoning was brought before the council of the great ones, the gathered gods themselves, and it was made a matter of judgment, of right and wrong weighed openly, of a claim spoken and answered and weighed again. Horus stood before that council and made his case. He was the son of Osiris. The throne descended to him. The one who held it by murder and had no right. Let the wrong be named, and let it be set right in the presence of them all. And Set contended against him. Of course he did, because Set was what he had always been, and he did not give up a thing he had seized any more gently than he had seized it. He stood before the same council and argued his own side, that he was strong, that he had held the land, that the kingship should stay with the one mighty enough to keep it. And so began a dispute that did not end in a day, or a season, or even in a single year. It stretched on. The two of them, the falcon and the hunter, the wronged son and the one who had done the wrong, argued their case before the gods, and were answered and argued it again. Claims were made and tested. One side seemed to win, and then the other. The council leaned one way, and then the other. It went on so long that you might have thought it would never end at all, that the wrong would simply argue itself in circles forever and never be set right. But there was one among the great ones whose whole nature was made for exactly this, and you have met him too, on the night the breath came back. Thoth, the scribe of the gods, the keeper of writing and reckoning and every kind of true knowing, the one who held the old words and set them down and got them right. Thoth was there through the whole long dispute, and Thoth was the one who kept it fair. He weighed the words on both sides. Where Anubis weighed hearts in the deep country, Thoth weighed arguments in the hall of the living gods, patiently, exactly, without leaning toward either out of fear or favor. He wrote down what was said. He held a counsel to what was true. When the dispute grew tangled and heated, it was the cool, clear mind of the scribe that kept it from tipping into something worse, that held it always to the question of what was right, and would not let it become only a question of who was strong. And Horus, for his part, did not waver through the long waiting, and that steadiness is worth pausing on. Think how hard that patience must have been. He had grown up an heir in hiding, a king with no throne, the son of a murdered father, and now that he stood at last before the great ones to claim his own, the claiming would not be quick. It stretched on, and still he did not abandon it, and still he did not reach past the judgment to settle the thing by force in the dark. He held to the slow way, the fair way, the way of standing before the council and making his case again and again until the truth of it could not be denied. There is a strength in that quieter than the strength Set boasted of, the strength to wait for a right thing to be recognized rather than to seize a thing by force. The falcon had it. He had learned it, perhaps, in his hidden years among the reeds, from the one who raised him and taught him that the patient way is the way that lasts. And slowly, the way everything in this story comes slowly, the truth of it settled. However long the hunter argued, the fact underneath the arguing did not change. The throne had descended to Horus. He was the rightful heir of the gentle king, and no strength and no cleverness of Set's could make that untrue. Piece by piece, hearing by hearing, the council came to see it, and Thoth wrote the seeing down, and at last the judgment was given. The throne was Horus's. It was awarded to him openly, in the presence of them all, by the weighing of the words and not by the spilling of blood. The son of Osiris was the king of the living land. The long wrong that had stood since the night of the sealed chest was, at last, set right. Picture the moment of it, quiet, even in its triumph. The council assembled, the long dispute finally stilled, the scribe setting down the final word of the verdict in his careful hand. And Horus, the son of the gentle king, receiving at last the thing that had been his since before he was born, the crown of the living land, the throne of his father restored to its rightful line. There was no roar to it, no blood on the floor of the hall. There was only a right thing done, plainly, in the open, before witnesses who could not dispute it. The wrong that had stood so long was answered not with another wrong but with judgment, and judgment is a quiet thing when it finally comes, quieter by far than the trouble it mends. Feel the ease of that and let it loosen something in you, because the whole night has been carrying this tension quietly under everything, all the way back to the feast and the beautiful cedar chest. A gentle king was murdered, and for the length of a whole story, the murder went unanswered while love did its slow work in the dark. And now, at last, it was answered. Not with more darkness. Not with a blow returned for a blow in the night. It was answered with judgment, with a patient weighing of right and wrong, with the wrong named plainly, and a throne restored to the one it truly belonged to. Balance came back into the world. The seat of the gentle king held his gentle son. The order that Set had broken so long ago was mended, and it was mended fairly, and it held. Let the chapter lay itself down there, in the great hall of the gods with the judgment given and the falcon crowned and the long dispute finally still. You do not have to hold attention anymore. It is over. The wrong is answered. The son has his own. The scribe has written it true, and the council has set its seal, and the world can breathe. There is a deep and settling peace in a thing at last made right, and that is the peace this hour hands to you. Carry it down toward morning. The throne is where it should be. The judgment is done. The night is nearly over, and everything crooked in it has been, gently and rightly, made straight again. And so the great story comes to rest, and everything in it finds its place. This is the last hour, the one the whole long night has been quietly moving toward, and there is nothing left in it to fear or to solve. It is only the settling. It is only the pieces of the story, after all their scattering and gathering, lying down at last where they belong, the way a house grows quiet at the end of a long day when everyone is finally home. Let this hour be soft on you. There is no more searching to do. There is no more wrong to answer. There is only the world, mended, breathing, turning gently toward the light. The two kingdoms settled into their places, and they did not trouble each other. Below, in the deep and quiet country, Osiris was king of the dead, the mild ruler of the far land, the one who waits in the hall where the gentle are welcomed home. Above, in the green country of the flood and the grain and the living sun, Horus was king, the falcon crowned, the rightful heir keeping the land his father had taught to be gentle. The Father below and the Son above, the still king and the living king, each in his own kingdom, each at peace with the other. What had been broken so long ago when a brother sealed a brother in a chest and gave him to the river, was whole now, and more than whole. The gentle king had not only been restored, he had been given a kingdom of his own to keep, and a son to hold the one he had lost, and the whole order of things, above and below, was set right and steady at last. And she rested. The one who had done the impossible, who had walked the length of 2 countries and gathered a scattered king from the whole face of the land, who had hidden in the reeds and guarded a child through the long dark years, Isis rested now, her long searching done. Think of everything she had carried, all the grief and all the labor and all the sleepless watching, and then think of her setting it down. There was nothing left to search for. The husband she had crossed the sea to find was a king in his own country now, safe past all further harm, waiting in the quiet land. The son she had guarded in the marsh was grown and crowned, and keeping his father's throne. Her work, the great work of her whole long story, was finished, and finished well. She could let her shoulders come down at last. She could rest. And the country rested with her, because the flood was drawing back. All through this story, the river had been high, spread wide and shining over the fields in the season of the flood. That same soft, edgeless sound of moving water that has been under the whole night, that you have been lying above since the very first roof and the very first reed mat. Now, as the story ended, the flood began to draw back the way it always does, sinking slowly from the fields, drawing down into its banks, leaving behind it the dark, rich earth that would feed the grain the gentle king had taught the people to plant. The water that had carried a sealed chest so long ago was only water again, only the good river doing its old kind work, rising and falling over the fields in its season, feeding the land, keeping the country alive. The world had come all the way back around to its gentleness. And over the whole land a great quiet settled, the particular quiet that comes only after a very long trouble is finally over. The country had passed through so much in the telling of this story. A king lost, a wife searching, a body scattered and gathered, a child hidden, a throne disputed across long years. And now all of it was done, and the land could simply be a land again, going about its old kind work with no grief hanging over it. In the towns along the river, the people slept, not knowing perhaps how much had been settled in the unseen places on their behalf, only feeling the way you feel a change in the weather, that the world had come right. The fields waited for the water to leave them so the planting could begin. The reeds stood still in the windless dark. Everything held its breath in that last hour before the dawn, and the breath it held was a peaceful one. And over all of it, the morning came. It came first to the sacred ground, to Abydos, the holiest city of the gentle king, the place where, in the long ages to come, the living would journey to be near him, the great destination of every soul that longed to lie close to the mild king when its own night came at last. Over Abydos, over its temples and its sand and its long memory of Osiris, the first change came into the sky. The deep black of the deepest hour thinned and grayed and softened. The stars grew faint. A pale light with no color in it yet crept up from the edge of the world, the first gray light, the one that tells you, even before you can see anything by it, that the dark is nearly done. And then, over Abydos and over the whole length of the shining river, the gray warmed into gold. The first thread of it came up along the rim of the land, thin and bright and certain, and the water caught it and gave it back, and the tops of the reeds caught it, and the mud walls of the sleeping towns caught it, and the whole country that had passed the night in the dark of this story began quietly to shine. The sun that had sailed all night through the deep country, through the kingdom of the gentle king, through the 12 dark hours, had made its crossing and come round again to the eastern edge of everything. And Ra lifted once more into the sky. The great light climbed up out of the far land and into the morning, exactly as it had climbed every morning since the first one, and the long night was over, and the day came gently on. And it was fitting, was it not, that the light should come first to Abydos, to the sacred ground of the gentle king, because that was the place that would hold his memory longest of anywhere in the land. Long after this night, long after all the nights of this story, the living would still be making their slow way to that city, carrying their prayers and their dead, wishing to lie near the mild king in the ground that remembered him. And every one of those mornings, across all those ages, the sun would come up over Abydos exactly as it came up on this one, gold along the temple walls, gold on the sand, gold on the long memory of the one who had crossed the dark ahead of everyone. The gentle king was safe below, and his city was bright above, and the sun that had sailed his kingdom in the night rose faithfully over the holiest of his grounds. It was the right place for a morning to begin. So the story lays itself down toward the dawn, and it asks you to lay yourself down with it, the last small distance into sleep. Everything is where it should be. The gentle king is safe in his quiet country, and someone kind is keeping the far land ready. The sun is crowned, and the throne is his. The one who searched has set her burden down and is resting at last. The flood is drawing back, and the good earth is coming up to meet the grain, and over the sacred city and over the whole wide river the sun is climbing back into a clear morning. There is nothing left undone. There is nothing left to fear. The whole long night has been crossed, hour by hour, exactly the way you have crossed it, and it has come out safely on the far side into the light. And you have come the same distance. You began this night on a warm roof above the shining fields, with the soft sound of the river the last thing standing between you and sleep, and you have followed the gentle king and the faithful wife and the crowned falcon all the way through the dark, and now the morning is coming for you too. You do not have to stay awake to see it. That is the gift of a night crossed all the way through. You may let it come without watching. Let your breathing go slow and even, the way the river goes. Let the last of the day slip all the way off your shoulders. The story is finished. The kingdoms are at peace. The sun is rising over Abydos and over the whole quiet land, and someone gentle is keeping every far country there is, and there is nothing at all left for you to do now but sleep. Rest. The night is over, and the morning is kind, and you are carried the last small distance safely into it.